the Adelaide Crows AFL seasons for 2024 is finally wrapped up, and my God, could we have finished that any worse? And it's not even just from a performance point of view. I mean, the game against Sydney, expected to lose, we did lose. There's no shocks there. Barring that second quarter, I thought we were competitive in the game and put up some good fight. But gosh, it just the culture around the club, or even the fact that it seems from as a fan's perspective, the Adelaide Crows just don't have a culture, and that's a massive issue. It's a culture is critical to every sporting organization and even every workplace. Uh, and the Crows just seem to absolutely lack one. The way Joshua Shelley was treated after the showdown was just mind blowing. I mean, to even if you disagree with what he did, and I said last week I'm a fan of it just because I think it added heat to the rivalry, and he would have known the risk he was taking in not, and if we didn't get the win and if he didn't perform, he knew that was a risk and was prepared to take that on. But and I was happy to see a player really show that emotion. Really, for me, those comments showed less about dissing the Port fans and more him trying to really buy in to the Crows as a club, is how that felt to me, and go, well, they're our rivals, we'll try and rile them up, get around the rivalry. And then it felt like every senior player to come out in the media and tell him and just publicly say that he was in the wrong and they shouldn't have done it. And it went against the cultural or the culture of the club. Is just mind blowing. Like, even if you think that's the case, you speak to him about that behind closed doors, and in the media, you show your support. You don't need a young star of the competition disgruntled when you're a club that struggles bringing recruits anyway and has a history of players wanting to leave to go home to Victoria. I mean, there would be no surprise if in a couple of years he decides, and if this treatment continues, he decides he wants out to go home, and Carlton, who he supported growing up, come knocking. And that's just not what you need from the Crows. And it was really disappointing to see that was the case. The decision to drop him made no sense at all, especially when you consider it was the last game of the season. To think that all the senior players and the coaches and Matthew Nicks sat around and went, you know, this is the last game of the season. Let's go into the off season, dropping our young player after he's tried to show a bit of character and personality, and so that can linger over the team the entire off season. What is that? What are you thinking? I mean, I saw they did the Mad Monday where they dressed up for the golf in the outfits, and that would have been cool if it felt like any of them. It just felt like, oh, we're doing this as a bit of an act rather than actually wanting to be there. It was just, it was, the treatment of Rochelle was so disappointing as a fan to see, and it just really soured an already poor season. And spoiler for the rankings that I've got coming, or the grades I've got coming up, I gave it a D minus. The only reason it's not an F, like Fox Footy, I believe gave the Crows as an F, is that there was a period in the season up until the Collingwood game when Rankin had that controversial running too far call that we ended up losing. And up until that point, there was about a month or a few weeks before that where it felt like we were starting to find form and like we could have kicked on. And then in that game, or after that play, Rankin gets injured, and that's when our season collapsed. And at one point, we had 6 of our best 18 players missing from the side for at least a few weeks. And yeah, Thilthorpe out, still recovering, who once he came back showed how good and important of a player he is. Miller was out as well. He went down earlier in the season. He's really important for us coming off half back. Rankin, as I said, is arguably our best player. It's him or Dawson, a 1A, 1B. Tex was out. Josh Worrell, who had a really good start to the season, and I had doubts about him coming to the season. He felt like one of those players who shows a lot of heart and fight for the team, but just isn't at the level. But the start of the season before he got injured was really impressive. He was really good and took a big step up. So we lost him. We lost Nick Murray as well in defense again, and that was another big injury. So 6 of our starting 18, it's not even of our 22, of our starting 18 had missing. And so that was the bit of leeway for that is why I'm giving it a D- instead of an F. But it was just, you thought after the Sydney result last year when the Crows were they just were robbed. It's just how it is. I'm not salty about it anymore. Like, I've moved on. It's just a fact that we were robbed and we probably would have gone out straight away. So it's not that big of a deal now. But you thought after that the Crows would really have an opportunity to kick on. It felt like, okay, our players are getting better, and it just fell down. We still haven't made finals since we made the grand final in 2017 when, shock horror, the Crows tried to instill some culture and absolutely fucked it in one of the worst off seasons for any club in any sport probably ever. Just the training camp from hell, which is that training camp, and hearing what happened there is the only time I've actually been genuinely ashamed to be a Crows fan. Like, I pretty much didn't want to tell people I supported them because I was like, how can I feel like I associate with that club after the treatment that happened in that camp? And it's clearly, we're still not over it. We still have issues in the club hierarchy that lack building a cohesive culture and needs a big overhaul. And so it's just, to miss out on finals again, it's just another disappointment. And we're gonna need some big signings through free agency or a big trade to bring in some real top end quality, because I do think the Crows have a good side, but it feels like we've got a lot of players where you're like, they're good role players on a top end side. We just lack the real top end star power. I'd say we've only got it in Rankin and Dawson, and then the likes of Rochelle, Thilthorpe can get there, and Fogarty I think is close as well. So, and Saliga, I think they're kind of the players you can see elevating, but we just need a bit more of that top end quality is what we're really missing. So that's what we need in the off season. If it just is status quo coming back in next year, I hope we have a good fast starter, else there'll be some big calls for Matthew Nix's job. And I have said previously in episodes that I think teams in general fire coaches too soon, but we're going into his 6th season. I think there's enough of a sample size to show that he may not be at the level required come if we struggle again next year. And he came in after a difficult period in trying to rebuild the culture, and the fact that we're now having cultural issues once again, it says, okay, well, what are we really getting out of this period? And so I've said it for a while to friends and family, and it's not even something I necessarily know if I want it to happen or not. It's just what I think will end up happening is that within the next 2 years, Matthew Nix will leave and Simon Goodwin will come in as the Crows coach. I think that's how it'll end up. I still haven't made up my mind if I think that'll be a good idea or not. I'll decide when for me, just looking at everything, I just feel like that's what's going to happen. I just think that's almost inevitable. So, yeah, I can just see that being the case, and I don't know if it'll be a good thing or not. I mean, Melbourne right now have their own issues as well, so it's almost a case of Melbourne is having so many issues that it's thankfully giving the Crows a bit of a break from being spoken about the way they probably should be in the dramas going on. So that's just what I expect to happen, and we'll see whether that's a good thing or not. But I'll get into some player performances as well now, just about we'll lose some of the players that I do think performed had really well, had some good seasons, whether it's good season for their expectations or just in general. And then also be discussing a few of the players who I think really didn't perform to the level we want, and what that kind of looks like moving forward. So we finished this section on a high. We'll start with the worst performers first. Roy Laird to end the season, I thought, was pretty shocking, to be honest. He's one of our best players. He's won 3 best and fairest. He'll probably be up there, to be honest, again this year. I think for the most part of the season, he was pretty good. It was just that end to the season. In the showdown, he was pretty terrible. Against Sydney, he was terrible. And after the comments he made about Rochelle in the media, I thought he was really poor. Brody Smith, as well, as an experienced player, felt like he'd aged this season. It felt like it really had caught up to him. Just a lot of basic errors that he doesn't normally make. I mean, he's normally a very good kicker of the ball. It felt like he was rarely hitting targets and really struggled. Didn't really provide that run off the halfback flank that he normally does. So I thought he had a really poor performance, and I saw a lot of Crows fans wanting to see him get dropped, especially when you saw Dan Curtin not getting game time. That was really seeing Smith play when he wasn't in form, but one of our top draft picks not getting picked, who performed well when he'd come in, was disappointing to see. Riley O'Brien in the ruck, I mean, he got dropped for a few games throughout the season, and he led the league in hitouts, and I believe hitouts to advantage as well. And he led the league in hitouts by like 100. Like, he won so many ruck contests. I was shocked to see that his percentage of hitouts to advantage is actually comparable to other ruckmen in the competition, because it felt like he would just straight up tap it to the other team constantly. It never went to the Crows players. And when you look at our midfield and Rankin and Dawson and Saligo, it's like, and Laird when he's playing well, and Matt Crouch, like, you look at that and go, we had good players in midfield, just they're never getting the tap of the ball, and other teams just win the clearances way too easily. And so I thought he had a really poor season. I think he's not that good on the ground either, so he then struggles to provide that. He's not also like a massive, like, he can take some marks on the wing to get out of trouble, but I wouldn't say he excels at that. And so I think a ruckman is really a position of need for the Crows. Looking forward, I don't know who that can be or where they come from, but Riley O'Brien I thought had quite a poor season. Lockie Murphy is a player that I love his passion and fight for the club, and it's kind of like how I spoke about Worrell earlier, where I thought where he's a player that just feels like he absolutely loves the club. He fights for every possession and disposal and puts his body on the line and really goes for it. I don't think he had a very good season. I think he just lacks that quality when he does get the ball. And so he is in the leadership group, but I just don't know where he fits in on a finals team. Like, I just don't know there's many other teams, and I don't know there's any teams who are currently in the top 10 that would actually really take him. And so when you look at that and you're comparing your squad, it's a case of, okay, well, if that's the level we're trying to get to, and I said I've gone for top 10, so it's still not even making finals in those last couple of positions. If that's the level we're aiming for, then if he doesn't fit in, well, we need to really look at moving on from him and really playing some other players that I think did have better seasons and probably deserve a bit more game time than they've got compared to him. Last player is Himmelberg. I think I don't want to talk too negatively about players in general, because I do believe they genuinely try the hardest and they get criticized a lot, and it's tough. And I think it's generally a case of like trying I try and be as positive as I can with things. It's just Himmelberg just always, every time I was watching games, I just felt like he was constantly out of position. I could never really tell what he was adding to the team when he played. It felt like it was a bit more, if it felt like there were genuinely times it felt like he almost got in the way because he'd be out of position, and it's almost like if he wasn't there, at least the team wouldn't think to try and get him the ball. They would be able to just play it to players in better spots, and it's just, I thought it was really poor, and I just don't see it well where he is. I don't think he's in our best 22 as it is now, and especially not as we move forward. It's a bit like kind of Billy Frampton was for us, who's now moved to Collingwood, and I get Billy Frampton has won a flag at Collingwood as well last year. In my opinion, put in the worst grand final performance of all time, but still won a flag. But I just, they're kind of two players I just don't think really are at the level we require. And so if we could find a way to move him on to, say, a GWS, I think he might even be out of contract, so I just wouldn't bring him back. I don't think he's required. But if he does, and then we trade him to GWS to be with his brother, that'd be preferred. But looking at some of the best performances or best performers for us this season, number one, you can't go past him. I think there's a genuine case that he should have been in the All-Australian squad. He wouldn't have made the actual team, but the squad, I think Ben Keys had a phenomenal season. He's a player I've really tried to defend when speaking with friends and family about him, because he was a player who was previously in that role of like fights for everything, hard runner, tries his best, but when he got the ball, just really lacked the skills behind it. I mean, even now, he is still one of the most one-footed players in the comp. But this year, he took a massive step up in terms of his quality with the ball, his goal kicking, his positioning was way better this year. His ability as well as a defensive forward, I thought was really, that it felt like the game against, it might have even been the game against Collingwood. I think he might have played on Dacos. It was a game like that. He played as like a defensive forward on one of the best halfbacks in the flank. It was relatively early this season, so I can't quite remember. And he played that defensive forward role and was phenomenal at it. And it felt like it was one of those games you're like, oh wow, like that was really good. And then from then he just took step after step, just continuously got better, and was one of our best performers this year. It'll be interesting to see how he goes in the club best and fairest as well when that's done. Phil Thorpe, when he came back from injury, you just saw how important he was to us, that marking key forward, can take pack marks, he's good at his feet, provides an option in the ruck as well as that second tall. He's just so important for us, and you could see we'd previously used Himmelberg and Gallant and Burgess to try and fill that void throughout the year, but you could just tell there was another step up in quality once he came back. And him and Fogarty, who also had a terrific year, I think, you could see you're like, okay, well, that's the forward line for the future. And I can see them being two of the big key forwards and really taking over from Tex as the top guys in the forward line for us. And I'm glad Tex has just tonight announced, or the club have announced, he's re-signed for next year, which I'm really happy about. I'm anticipating that'll be his last season, but I love the fact he's a one-club player. He can provide that experience to those guys for one more season around the club, so that's really good. He obviously, Tex himself, didn't have the same season he had the year before. I think we just in general struggled a bit more as an offense. He was up the ground a bit more than I think he was the year before. And so that really made a difference. It was kind of trading some of what Tex did to boost Fogarty. Felt like a bit more balanced than we had the year before. So didn't have the same year. Didn't have a bad year, I don't think. Struggled a little bit with injury throughout the season. Just some niggling things that would come up for like 1 or 2 weeks at a time. But he had an okay season. Isaac Rankin was phenomenal when he played. Unfortunately, just injuries and then the suspension missed basically a third of the season. When he played, there was talks that he was on that trajectory for one of the best players in the comp. He would have no doubt been All-Australian had he played the full season. He's just his ability with the ball, his excitement, he just weaves in and out of traffic. He's mesmerizing to watch when he's at his best. And if we can keep him fit and suspension free for a full season, I think that goes a long way to the Crows having a good season. I think Jordan Dawson had another fantastic season. The one at E1B with Rankin for best player in our team. You just could always tell whenever the Crows were doing something well, one of those two were involved heavily and really took that turnaround. I mean, in the showdown, when everything was kind of falling apart, Dawson was standing up and really trying to fight and pull the Crows back in it. And so I thought he had a really good season this year. Rochelle, I thought he's one of those players that I think gets so much focus that he can very quickly become underrated, because you almost have so much expectation on him for what he did in his first season and the glimpses he showed to be at, say, Rankin's level that he is now. But he's still young. He's still developing. I think he's 21. Like, I thought he had a really good year. It was something like 34 goals, maybe 30 goals, around that mark, with a ton of goal assists as well. He was heavily involved. I thought he was good. He knows the areas of his game he's got to work on, and he seems really motivated to work on those. He's addressed him. To me, he comes across as someone who holds himself accountable for what he needs to do, which is why the treatment of him in the media to me felt so ridiculous from the Crows players coming out and talking about him, because he's someone who during the season came out and said, this part of my game wasn't good enough, I need to work on it. So he's aware of that. He holds himself to a higher level, and he knows what he has to work on. So it feels like a bit more of a quiet behind closed doors conversation could have been had about it if we did really have that big of an issue with how he acted and what performed or how it all went down. And so I thought generally he had quite a good season. I thought some surprise packets from Zach Taylor coming in, debuting. I thought he showed some really good signs throughout the games. I mean, in that last game against Sydney as well, he got his first goal. Just real hard-nosed player. I thought he played really well. Hugh Bond was really good, I thought, when he played. Once he came in the side, he felt like you needed to keep him, and you just couldn't afford to drop him. I thought he was really impressive. And then Curvis coming in really, really quickly filled that Millera void where he sometimes gets himself into a bit of trouble because he just wants to take on everyone, but he succeeded a lot of times and it was really impressive. And there were times he could dart around a player, sell some candy, and he'd break through and get the Crows on the run. So I thought he had a really good season. I think he'll be really good next season as well. Worrell, as I said, was really good when he played. He was really impressive. Saligo took a massive step up, especially in the first half of the year. It felt like once the Crows kind of started to wane, and when you could really see after that Collingwood game, the Crows fall down, I thought he struggled a bit more. But in that first half of the season, I thought he was really good, and he still had those moments throughout the second half of the year, and he's only young, so I'm sure they'll keep getting better. He had a massive step up. Max McElhaney is unreal as a young defender. His game awareness, his ability he's quick enough to stay with smaller players. He's quite a good mark as well, I think, and just excellent reader of the ball is what I typically notice with McElhaney. So I think he's really, really good. And to me, they were the biggest standouts of this season that overall had very few from a Crows perspective, but hopefully next season's a bit better, and if nothing else, we've got the AFLW kicking off this weekend, which I'm really looking forward to. I think that should be good. Crows are at least good in that as well, and so hopefully we can contend for the flag once again and go for it and put up a good fight. So let me know your thoughts on the Crows season. Who you thought were the best performances, what was disappointing, what would you grade it as well? Let me know. But yeah, hopefully next season's better, but go the Crows, I guess. Thank you for listening. This is actually a clip from my full podcast, the Armchair Athlete podcast. If you haven't listened to it in full, be sure to go check it out. I'll link the video on the screen as well, and check out any of the other clips as well. They'll be floating around. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, or like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below any of your thoughts on this as well. More engagement, the better, as I continue to try and grow the channel and boost the audiences, and yeah, trying to just keep getting better ultimately. So let me know in the comments below if you've got any suggestions or topics as well you want to discuss. But I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.